Welcome to Wanderlust with the Mackenzies. This episode we're covering 10 lesser known places that we think you should add to your bucket list.
Now, we haven't traveled everywhere, but we have seen a number of places that really jumped out to us that when we got there, we said, oh, this was fantastic. We will come back.
Number 1 is Meteora Greece. So Meteora in Greek means suspended in the air, which is aptly named for the 6 Greek Orthodox monasteries that are perched on top of these sandstone pillars in northern Greece. So Meteora is about 220 miles from Athens, and we recommend that you don't try and do it as a day trip. We hired a private guide. A van came and picked us up at our hotel in Athens and took us to a nearby town of Kolumbaka. We spent the night there, and then we were able to tour the monasteries the next day, which are just truly remarkable. The whole scene is just breathtaking. Tip for the ladies, that you are required to have either a dress or a skirt. So even though I had long pants on, I did have to tie a skirt around my waist, but this is something that they provided, but just jaw-dropping, and we'd go back there in a heartbeat.
In a heartbeat, for sure. You know, the drive up, we stopped at Delphi, and you've heard of the Oracle of Delphi. Well, there it is, and there are ruins there that describe there in a little theater within the ruins. It's amazing. Apparently that started about the 8th century BC and ran for 1100 years. So great history, worth a stop. Of course, we've all heard of it. On the way back, you've probably heard of this too, the Battle of Thermopylae. So at Thermopylae, the greatly outnumbered Greek forces defeated the Persian forces led by their Emperor Xerxes. And also a nice piece of history and an easy stop along the way. It was really a nice couple of days that trip was.
Yeah, so you get breathtaking views coupled with, it's Greece, so there's just a lot of history. Because monasteries date back to the 12th century, so worth a stop.
Our second stop is in Iceland. Now, there are many places you can go in Iceland, and once you make the trip there, you'll hit a lot of them. One that we'd recommend that you see is one of the waterfalls called Seljalandsfoss. And it is about 2 hours from Reykjavik, and it is one that you can hike up, not very far, but be behind the waterfall and look out on the magnificent desolation that is Iceland. So it's just a short day trip and one worth taking.
And another tip is make sure that you pack rain gear because you are going to get wet. But it's a very cool experience just to be standing behind this curtain of water that is coming down, and one that we found very memorable.
Yes, and you know, we went, I believe it was early July, and the days are very long. I remember looking out at midnight thinking, the sun's supposed to set, right? Because we were past June 21st, past the solstice or whatever. And so we just found that it was great to have all of that daylight.
Yeah, so there's a lot of cool things to check out in Iceland, a lot of waterfalls, but this one was our favorite. And number 3 takes us to Australia. So Uluru, which is formerly known as Ayers Rock, is a very popular tourist destination in the center of Australia in the outback. One of the closest major airports is in Alice Springs, which is where we flew in to go visit Uluru. And we stayed overnight in Alice Springs and found a real gem of a place that we hadn't heard of before that is called the Kangaroo Sanctuary. So the Kangaroo Sanctuary was founded by Dan Barnes. This is a rescue place for orphan joeys who have lost their mothers, where people can take them to be cared for. We went there at dusk. It's very interactive. You walk amongst the, within a gated area, a fenced-in area, amongst the kangaroos. But the biggest treat is that you get to hold joeys in makeshift pouches and feed them milk from bottles. I know Phil fed one of the older kangaroos, a juvenile, I guess, that was out and about. And for us who had never seen kangaroos in person before because we're from the States. It was just a real treat if you're an animal lover. This is a place not to be missed. Our daughter was with us and she had this huge grin on her face the entire time, and it was just a wonderful experience.
Now back to the Northern Hemisphere for number 4. Our stop is in Lake Pletvice National Park, Croatia. So it is the oldest and largest national park in the country. And it's kind of like the national parks we've become accustomed to here in the United States. They're well cared for, they're a little bit remote. This is beautiful. It has lakes and waterfalls like you will not believe. Beautiful, relatively short hikes that are on boardwalks, so it's safe. You know, we were recently in Yellowstone and we were worried about bears and moose and buffalo. Don't have to worry about that. There are a lot of tourists, you'll have a lot of company there, but the views are just spectacular.
And number 5 takes us to New Zealand. We took a heli hike for the Franz Josef Glacier in the Southern Alps. And a heli hike means is that we took a helicopter ride that flew us up to the Alps, dropped us off at the edge of the glacier, and then we had a guided hike amongst all the ice boulders and so forth. And they gave us all the gear that we had, waterproof coats and pants and boots and crampons and poles and all that was needed to navigate that kind of terrain. And we spent about 3 hours for there. And this was a very cool experience for me, something very new. Maybe not as much for Phil because he's actually climbed real mountains before and has been at much higher altitudes than that. But the landscape is completely surreal. These ice boulders are the size of cars and small buildings. We were able to drink fresh glacier water, pure water bottles, and fill them up, and it's as refreshing and clean as you would expect, and it was just a really cool experience.
It was. Now, we were warned that if weather came in, the helicopter couldn't take off and bring us off the mountain. Doesn't happen often, but in fact it recently had happened and is something that they had to warn everybody. So they kind of vet you to make sure that you're able to be stuck for a day or two in a protected place up there. It's just that you can't leave. It's like the Hotel California on occasion, apparently. And so we were fine. We got off the mountain just fine. So there's a bit of seriousness to it in that you're in a really remote location that you can't just walk off of. But you can kind of plan for the day, and almost always it goes fine. So you need a sense of adventure, but you don't need experience mountain climbing or working on glaciers or anything like that. You get that there, and boy, is it fun. Our 6th destination is Lake Bled, Slovenia. Located at the foot of the Julian Alps in northwest Slovenia, this is one of the most beautiful places you'll ever see. There is a medieval castle from about the year 1003, I believe it is. And in the middle of the lake is an island that has a church from the late 1600s. Everything about this place is gorgeous.
It truly is a magical place. The water is this turquoise blue color. You often see this as screensavers for your wallpaper on your computers, and was really a worthwhile destination.
We were there in the summertime, and we drove around the area and did a couple of hikes, which I would highly recommend. And I know if you come in the wintertime, there is skiing nearby. So I think any time of the year is worthwhile. Just depends on what you want to see, but the views are spectacular.
And number 7 is Cappadocia, Turkey. I have to admit, this is a location that has been on my bucket list for quite some time, specifically to go on a hot air balloon ride. There are often many photos of Cappadocia with dozens of hot air balloons suspended over this very surreal landscape, which is volcanic rock that are shaped in pillars, hoodoos or fairy chimneys or what they call them. In fact, they have a whole region that they call Love Valley. But we were fortunate enough to take a hot air balloon ride. It was as wonderful as I had hoped. And I can attest, if you are afraid of heights, that it's a different experience in a hot air balloon with the floating. That didn't bother me at all. So hopefully if you have that as a fear, that you'll consider it as well. When we did land, after spending about maybe an hour in the air, that we landed in our basket. We had 8 people in our balloon, and they had a champagne breakfast waiting for us, and we were able to walk inside of the balloon as they were deflating. The one thing that's great about the balloons is that they go up every day, 365 days a year, weather permitting. And even the next day when we were in our hotel, that we could experience it a second time with a bunch of balloons that were hovering just maybe 20 feet above the ground outside of our hotel. So it was just truly a magical experience.
Destination number 8 is Krakow, Poland. Now, this is a medieval city that has history, obviously, from many hundreds of years ago, and recent history as well. So the city itself is charming. It has a city square with lovely restaurants and just a wonderful old world vibe. Poland itself is not part of the EU as far as currency is concerned, so you have to get zloty. And bad news, good news, you have to get zloty. The good news is the exchange rate, at least when we were there, and probably is now, very strong to the dollar. So there were bargains. That the place that we stayed was relatively inexpensive. The restaurants were relatively inexpensive, and food was great and ample. Modern history is a little more difficult, but worth checking into. The movie Schindler's List, of course, is about Oskar Schindler and his efforts to change part of the course of the war. And his factory, his original factory, is in Krakow, Poland, and it is worth a visit. Not far outside of town is Auschwitz and Birkenau. And I think we all have to go to it, and we did. And I'm glad we did. So I don't know how you describe that, a troubling bit of our human history, pretty recent, and important to see, and maybe just try in the smallest way to understand. But really, Krakow itself was one place that we thought we'd try, and we were really impressed by.
And number 9 is Hallstat, Austria. So we had titled this episode 10 lesser known places to add to your bucket list. And while Hallstat maybe isn't as popular or well known as Paris and London and Rome or Florence or some of those bigger cities, it's definitely been found by tourists and can be quite crowded in the summer months. We had the benefit of, we went during the winter, and that we would recommend just because it's a completely different landscape and experience with the snow-covered mountains and trees. And it was very lovely, and Hallstat is pretty much like stepping into a postcard. It's definitely one of those Instagrammable type of cities. It has that iconic church similar to Lake Bled that you always see pictures of. We explored Old Town. Most of our time there was just wandering through the streets. And once again, a lot of things were closed. A lot of businesses weren't open. There is a salt mine tour that you can take. You can also rent a boat to be on the lake, which is Hallstat Sea. There are swans, which adds to the local charm, but worthwhile to take a day trip. We took a day trip from Salzburg. If you're there during the summer months, it might be preferable to stay over so that you're there in the evening hours when it's a little quieter, and then again in the morning. And it can get quite hot sometimes in the summer months. But we would recommend winter, and just a great place to check out because it is absolutely beautiful.
And destination number 10 is Mostar, Bosnia-Herzegovina. That is on the Balkan Peninsula, as you know, part of former Yugoslavia. and it is a charming Muslim city. It has this bridge that was destroyed during the war in the 90s, and it has been rebuilt and is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. That's just part of it. Throughout the day, you are called to prayer, and the town quiets down. And in the evening, it seems to party. It was a lively place with a very warm country, old town feeling.
And that concludes our list of 10 lesser known destinations that we suggest that you add to your bucket list. By no means is it exhausted. There's still plenty of the world that we want to explore, so I'm sure we'll be adding to that in the years to come.
I bet many of you have been to places that you're thinking, well, this is a special place and they should go there. Leave it in the comments below. We love to expand our bucket list, and we're going to be aggressive about checking them off. So until next time, tell your friends
And happy travels.